Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this monthly in-depth long-range forecast for Ag Caroline and Ag South Farm Credit. We're going to have to start off today talking about the hurricane. Of course, some of you might watch this video even after the hurricane's done, but it's going to be a major part of this near-term forecast. And it's going to be critical to understanding where we're going in October and where we're heading this fall and winter, which we're going to cover in this video. The animation you're watching is from what we call a mesoscale floater. So we can train GOES-16, that's one of our geostationary satellites, to look at a very specific region and capture across all of its bands, capture data every single minute and radio it back to Earth for us to look at. So this is the infrared satellite data. So whenever you see these really dark colors here, we're looking at very, very cold cloud tops, very intense convection. Now, as I'm recording this on Tuesday morning, this thing still has not been named Helene. It is still potential tropical cyclone number 9. And we're watching for this to develop as it moves through the Yucatan Channel. So to get you oriented geographically, this is the Yucatan Peninsula. This is Cuba. There's Jamaica. And this system is expected to go right through the Yucatan Channel. Now, what's critical about it is there's a current, an ocean current in here called the loop current. And generally speaking, in the Gulf of Mexico, it is the hottest part of the Gulf of Mexico. Hurricane strength is directly tied to ocean temperatures. It's a direct relationship. So as one increases, so does the other. And the risk is that we're going to get some rapid intensification over the loop current, given that the wind shear profile is low. We do not see a whole lot of really dry air getting kind of entrained into the system. And that's going to have a huge impact on where the system goes as it gets towards Florida over the next couple of days, making landfall at some point on Thursday. What will also be interesting is this. Early this morning on Tuesday, there is a trough of low pressure digging in right here. You actually see the cloud cover around it. There's some cloud cover out ahead of this. In fact, most of the Carolinas and Virginia were cloudy this morning as we're watching some remnant moisture move out of the way. But it's this trough that's on the backside that's going to be critical to the rainfall totals I'm expecting, especially in western North Carolina, western South Carolina, and into Georgia. And the reason for that is this trough is going to dig as Helene comes into Florida and moves through Georgia. And that trough is what's pushing it a bit farther to the east, and then it's eventually going to pull it. So it's going to push initially and then pull it back toward the west. Now, why that's important is that's going to take a lot of flow loaded up with a lot of moisture and push it right into the Carolinas. And that's where I'm getting very concerned about the flooding threat the farther west and south you go through parts of North and South Carolina. So let's take a look at this. Of course, Florida and Georgia are going to take the brunt of this system, but the major flooding along the Appalachian Mountains is the main story here. Let's get an idea from the current super blend of weather forecast models as to the timing and location of the center of the circulation. Where we are here is on, getting toward, this is getting toward Thursday morning and Thursday afternoon. So it looks like Thursday afternoon and evening is where we're expecting this landfall for this system. I would guess somewhere around 7 or 8 o'clock based off of what I know today. It looks like it's going to hit the Big Bend of Florida. Now watch what happens as this gets pulled across parts of Georgia, which I am expecting tropical storm force winds to make it into a substantial part of Georgia here. It's going to get pulled to the north and then straight toward Tennessee and Kentucky, and then start to curl around into my home state of Illinois. The reason? There's a trough digging in here that's going to pull the system around its northern side just like that. And what I don't like about that change in trajectory is what it's going to do is it pushes up against the higher elevation in the western Carolinas and northern Georgia. Intensity-wise, the model forecasts still show quite a large spread, but we don't often use the CMC or the GFS or even the UK Met to predict how strong this is going to be. But the National Hurricane Center, the black line, has got this at a strong Category 2, but our very specifically designed hurricane models are projecting this to possibly be up here approaching Category 5 in intensity. And I will tell you, the upper limit on this, should all of the other ingredients fall into place, is a strong Category 5 strength hurricane. Now, what do we expect? We expect it to be a major hurricane, Category 3 at least. The National Hurricane Center's latest update suggested that. If we get a new look, let's get a refresh on this to see if they changed anything. Okay, no. Overall, they're looking at peak storm surge to be somewhere here in the Big Bend, with Tampa Bay picking up 5 to 8 feet of storm surge. And there's not much expected on the western side of it where the winds will be coming offshore, going out to open ocean. But if we do have a look at their latest warning cone, this is the one they've issued. This is the 8 a.m. Eastern time on Tuesday. That M denotes that at least Category 3 in strength. They've put out hurricane watches. They will change that to a hurricane warning once this comes within 48 hours. But the center of circulation is going to go right over southern Georgia and then make its way up toward Tennessee and Kentucky. So you can see some pretty consistent behavior here between the model forecast and the National Hurricane Center, excuse me. By the way, this is your go-to resource, okay? If you don't remember the website, it's nhc.noaa.gov. Please bookmark this. Have it available on your phone, whatever you can do. It's still called Potential Tropical Cyclone number 9, but you click on that and you get access to all of those maps I just showed you, okay? From here, I want to show you a very specific model. It's called the HAFSA. It's a hurricane-only forecasting model. Now, unlike other maps I show you where the geography in the background stays stationary, this particular model follows the center of circulation, which means as I move forward in time, the middle of the hurricane is always going to be in the middle of the square of the map. So here's the Yucatan Peninsula, there's Cuba, there's the center of Helene. This is tomorrow afternoon when it will likely be up to a hurricane. We are expecting very rapid intensification. As you can see here, wind speeds in the eastern Iowa, which will be the strongest side of this hurricane, easily eclipsing 100 miles an hour, probably gusts up there 120 to 130. And the forecast timing is on Thursday, late Thursday afternoon into the evening hours, 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the evening. It's going to be very close to the Big Bend in Florida. Now watch, as it makes landfall, we are expecting it to drag tropical storm force winds pretty far inland into Georgia. But playing this forward, watch it make this turn toward the center of Georgia and then toward northern Georgia. And this is where I get very concerned, because all that moisture on this side is going to be pushing through South Carolina into North Carolina, up against the Appalachian Mountains, the Blue Ridge Mountains, pushing the flow over the mountains, which is going to enhance the chance for getting some extremely heavy rainfall. And we need to have a discussion about what that's going to look like. First, wind forecasts are going to be challenging. They are. These models are not designed, the ones I'm showing you now are not designed to accurately get the winds. But we do see that we will likely get well past the thresholds needed for a lot of these counties to trigger insured losses. Now, how far inland does that go? That's going to be tricky. Is it more of South Carolina after hitting Georgia? Possibly. This is the European model solution. The GFS is much, much more aggressive. I mean, just take a look at some of these wind speeds that are expected. The GFS model, of course, has a powerful hurricane hitting Florida, but into Georgia, South Carolina, and this part of North Carolina, we're expecting winds in the 50, 60, 70 mile an hour range across a broad area. And then we expect some of these gusts to be getting up over 80 miles an hour in parts of Georgia. I think that is definitely something that has a higher probability of happening. So we got to watch this very carefully going forward. Now, I need you to understand, this is not even named yet. We're still waiting on this. This is all model forecast, but it's what I've got. It's the analysis I have available to me on Tuesday. That's why I want you to stay tuned in to the National Hurricane Center. As it stands, there's not a whole lot going on. We still have some of the coastal flooding issues here. And we've got the flood watches that have been posted, the hurricane watch that's been posted. That'll flip over to a warning once we get out there to within 48 hours. But the thing to be paying most close attention to with this is the interaction it's going to have with a feature that's coming through the Midwest. Remember that on the satellite image earlier? Watch this all come together. This is why I think this is a very dangerous situation for flooding. This low over the Mid-South is cut off. What does that mean? It's got a closed circulation on it. See that isobar completely closed? So the jet stream, which starts here, goes way over the top of it and leaves it just sitting and spinning. I don't know. It's kind of like when you put your hand in the water in the pool and you move it through quickly and all of a sudden a little eddy spins up. Your hand keeps moving, but behind it, you leave a little spin up. Helene is here at this point. This is Wednesday afternoon and evening. And what happens is as we get toward Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon, and Thursday evening when we're expecting landfall, this low is going to do something which we call the Fujiwara effect. Maybe you've heard that from some of your local meteorologists or maybe even on the Weather Channel. I'm sure that a lot of meteorologists are talking about it if I am. And what it is, is when you have two low pressure systems that get close to one another, they tend to resist combining and instead they tend to orbit. So the bigger one to the north will go to the south. The one that's coming up here, Helene, will wrap around. And we call that the Fujiwara effect after the Japanese scientists who discovered it. Now watch as this happens. What I'm concerned about is that this low flings Helene right through Georgia, straight toward the Appalachian Mountains, the Blue Ridge Mountains, right in through here, enhancing the lift, creating a bigger flooding problem. Then eventually, the bigger extratropical low, which is this one, not Helene, absorbs most of the flow from Helene. It's still cut off and spinning by Saturday into Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And it's not until this trough comes over the Great Lakes which will have wind coming in like this. It's going to kick this sucker out. And that's why we'll even look out there into the week 2 forecast and still see some moisture from Helene. Now, beyond that, we expect some of week 2 to be on the drier side of things, all right? But some of Helene's moisture is going to show up in the week 2 forecast. I just want you to understand why. All right, let's get a look at some of these totals. I'm going to show you several models. We're going to start off with the artificial intelligence. As you can see here, the swath of heaviest rain is going to be up against elevation here. The AIFS model, the Artificial Intelligence Forecasting System, has got through parts of Georgia, widespread 4 to 6 inches and over a foot of rain here at highest elevation. This is what I'm mostly concerned about with this system. In Georgia, it's going to be the flooding and the wind. And the artificial intelligence is different a bit from the WPC. Notice how much wetter it is getting into this part of Georgia. But still, right up against the mountains is where we're expecting widespread 6 to 10, maybe 6 to 12 inches of rainfall. From there, this is the national blend of models. Very similar. This is now the newest update from the European model high-resolution version. Again, take a look at northern Georgia. Then get into this part of North and South Carolina. There's still widespread 1 to 5 inches here, but the greatest rainfall seems to be in this area. Let's now go look at the European ensemble. This is where we take 51 different model simulations and average them together to get a blend to understand what they most likely think will happen. And you can see those same patterns emerging like I talked about. From there, we're now looking at the GFS. This is an operational model run. It's got the heavier rainfall totals, but the GFS is a lower resolution model, which means it doesn't handle the mountains very well. But take note of how much wetter it is in parts of southeastern Georgia compared to the other forecasts. So this is where we're getting this model spread we're talking about. What's interesting is we'll end up seeing a rain shadow effect here on this side of the Blue Ridge Mountains, much drier on the western facing slopes versus eastern. And to finish this up, I've got a couple more for you here. This would be the GFS ensemble. And actually, that's my last one. The GFS ensemble would be your 7-day total. So I think the flood threat with this is extremely high. It's higher the farther west you go. Georgia will be dealing with strong winds that I think will be strong enough to trigger insurance payments. So we need to watch that very carefully with this system. Now remember, that is just a projection. I just think there's going to be wide enough strong winds that this could be the case. What does this system remind me of? It reminds me a lot of Hurricane Michael. That is the hurricane that I'm thinking a lot about with this. Now, what is it going into? Well, if we look over the next 7 days, the big feature is just the other trough that it's going to get absorbed into. So precipitation totals compared to average, this is what you get. The rest of the country is watching you, just so you know. There's nothing else going on for us, so we're keeping an eye on this hurricane. Over the last 14 days, I want to take note of this area right in through here that's been so dry. You see, that part of Georgia and South Carolina has missed out on potential Tropical Cyclone 8 that went through here and up toward Virginia, absolutely soaking parts of North Carolina. And then we had Francine before that came up and went like this. It all missed this area of Georgia and South Carolina, which means that is the area that's got the greatest risk of flooding because it's been so dry, the ground is solid, you're going to hit it with rain, it's going to run off. And it's not just the last 2 weeks, it's the last 30 days. That whole strip in there has been quite dry. Another way to look at it is just to examine the ranks. These are precipitation ranks since the beginning of the month. Again, potential Tropical Cyclone 8 came through here, which is why we see such wet conditions in parts of North Carolina, hitting those climate districts. There's our dry corridor. And then Francine did this, and that's why you see that wet signal in the Mississippi Valley. I want you to also note one other thing. We are exceptionally dry in places throughout the Corn Belt. Our soil moisture is very low through the Missouri Basin, the Mississippi Basin, and the Ohio Basin. So for us, getting the moisture from this system before harvest, not necessarily a terrible thing, but it's too much. But I want you just to take note of how dry things are here, because what eventually funnels into the Mississippi River, which this morning was 10.3 feet below low stage, exactly where it was a year ago. This is becoming a big problem for the Mississippi Basin, which will be huge for agriculture coming out along the river, getting out to port, and then fertilizer and other things coming back up. That's what I got for you on Helene. We've got other things going on right now. Just take a look at this radar animation. Let's go ahead and get this updated. There was overnight last night into early this morning some scattered rain here. We can see the broader system moving toward the east that could increase our rainfall change. Look at that rain this morning in North Carolina. We had some storms. They weren't too much to talk about. Some that are coming here toward the Appalachian Mountains, but that's about it. Just wanted to show you some new lightning data here. But this is what I want you to see ahead of this. In fact, let's just zoom in on the southeast. That'll be a better view of what to expect. There we go. So playing through the rest of the day on Tuesday, isolated storms. Frontal boundary hits the mountains by Wednesday morning. See it over there? Now Helene begins to dominate. Helene's kind of cloud shield and rain already by early Thursday morning spreading into parts of southern Georgia. That's way before the hurricane even gets here. And we're not yet able to see what the high-res name where it'll eventually be by the time we get out to that Thursday night time frame. So midday Thursday, somewhere here, we're already going to have a push of moisture before it even gets there. So this is what's going to make the flooding problem even worse. Now, in addition to all of this, we also have this going on. There is in the Bering Sea what we call the positive phase of something we call the WPO, the West Pacific Oscillation, the positive phase of it. And what that means is we keep sending lows here into the Gulf of Alaska. They then drive up over ridges that open into the central United States, and we get a kind of a reflection low that tends to live here. And I want you to understand what that's going to do in the upcoming pattern I'm about to explain to you going forward. But this is not only having an influence on our precipitation after this, but it's also going to have an influence on our temperatures. Now, next week's precipitation, this is the day 8 through 14 map. See them all here? Notice that for the most part, we just have to wait for Helene's leftovers to get out. That's why you see a little bit wetter here. But after they're out, there's not a whole lot of precip following this, which means we will get a chance to dry out and unfortunately start to clean up. But what are the temperatures going to do in response? Well, here's today's highs. Again, some cloud cover keeping a bit cooler to the north. There's tomorrow on Wednesday, still slightly above average. We then get into Thursday. There's where the cloud cover comes in from Helene. Friday, near normal temperatures, but cloudy, windy. I mean, this is when we're going to be really watching for the heavy rains in here. These are probably overdone temperatures just because of the cloud cover. That's Saturday into Sunday. The low's still spitting in the mid-south. Then by Monday, it's trying to move back over the mountains and start to head its way out toward the mid-Atlantic. When you look out there at the, day 0 through 5, day 5 through 10, day 10 through 15, most of the models as we approach that first full week and first full weekend of October are a bit cooler in the southeast. And the reason is we're taking low pressure, driving it in here. There's a ridge that opens up there, and we're keeping low pressure in this area. Keep that in mind as I'm about to explain to you where I think this pattern's going to go. Because in early October, just like we are now, the WPO is positive. It drops back to neutral, then jumps back up again. And I think that's going to shape up what the first week of October is going to look like. And you're going, Eric, you've lost me, my friend. Okay, let me put it all together. It looks like this. The new October forecast from the European model suggests we keep getting lows here that drive their moisture into the west coast of Canada with broader ridging here. And that's why overall October has a drier forecast for us. It's also dry across the rest of the cotton belt. And the reason for that is if that ridge stays in place, there's no flow. Now, where's the big, where could this go wrong? Where it could go wrong is the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean are still primed to make tropical systems. Even after Helene goes through, we are not going to be done with it. And we could get another system very easily formed there that this model cannot predict. It can't do it. It's not designed to do it. I think there's another complicating factor with this, and that is that the MJO, which was just recently in early September to mid-September in phase 6 or phase 5, has now moved into phase 7, 8, and 1, and it's going to dive back into null space going forward. You say, well, what does that mean? Well, that typically means this. We get lows in the Bering Sea that come into the Gulf of Alaska. There's a ridge. Hear the narrative kind of repeating itself? Troughs over the Great Lake, that's the reflection low. And as a result, the pattern just tends to dive into this area and pull back out. That's why we see some cooler air coming in once we get out there into early October. Now, in terms of what we're seeing in terms of those temperatures, look, October 8 through 14, cooler. October 15 to 21, near normal. Where's the heat? Under the ridge. What about precipitation? Well, this is the CFSV2, still drier in the interior. Not a strong signal for us to be wet, but one hurricane can completely toss that out. So October, that was a quick look, but that's what I'm seeing for October. I think we have some cooler air in place, not cold, but cooler. And I think we have a chance of being drier unless you get another tropical system coming through. But that's not where we stop in these videos. I tell you they're long range, and we're going to focus at the end here on long range and global weather. So listen carefully. We've been watching all summer long the development of a La Nina. It's just now that it's beginning to show up where the ocean temperatures are a full degree Celsius below normal that you could call this thing like into La Nina territory. I've looked at every long-range forecast model, including the new one. We just got it right now. This is the newest one from the Japanese. Look at all their maps. I know you're not going to like looking at them because you're not a nerd like me, but take a look. They've got La Nina lasting through winter. That's the cool tongue of water you see here. They've also got stronger trade winds going, and they're saying that this is going to all compile itself into a lot of MJO phase 4 this winter. Now, what does all of this mean? Let me stitch this together for you. MJO phase 1 is in Africa. 2 is in this part of the Indian Ocean. 3 is here. There's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're just tracking where these big clusters of rising motion and storms live. And if we have a La Nina, we tend to really favor, look at this, historically, we favor a lot of MJO phase 4 and 5. Now, what's the point of me telling you that? The point of me telling you that is this. If the MJO lives here, it tends to ruin the subtropical jet, making it weaker, while the polar jet tends to dive into the northwest, go into the Midwest, and eject out of the Ohio River Valley. What I'm trying to do is provide you some evidence based off of the interaction between the ocean patterns and the atmospheric patterns governed largely by La Nina going forward to explain this. This is what we think winter temperatures are going to do. We think overall, December, January, February, when you average all the days together, is going to be mild. But unlike last winter, this winter is going to be set up to give you these punctuating outbreaks of cold air that could get all the way to the coast. And what I'm very interested to see is, during this winter, can we build a lot of very high pressure in this area such that lows that come through this region and try to leave can get to the coast or dig a bit farther and roll up the coast, increasing our precipitation chances. Because the CPC forecast for winter, this is January, February, March, it's trying to bring some drier risk in here. That dry risk is all because the jet stream winds are weak. They're weak during winters with La Nina, but I think this is a winter that if we can change the behavior of the North Atlantic, we can get more storm systems rolling up the East Coast, giving us a greater threat of those bigger winter storms in the middle of winter and a better chance at getting cold air intrusions at times. But you just need to understand why all of the models look like this. They're trying to take drought from the central cotton belt and spread it into the southeast. And the reason for that is weak jet stream winds here, called the subtropical jet, much more highly variable North Pacific jet or polar jet that does that. What I'm saying is we just need to be on the lookout for the chance for this winter to have a better scenario to drive systems over the Appalachian Mountains, up the I-95 corridor. And I want to watch that because I do not want to see winter drought develop. Now, of course, in the near term, it's all a story about flooding. I'm just talking about beyond that. October, November, December, January, February, March. I've looked at every model there is. They all look exactly the same as what I'm showing you here. Okay? So let's finish with a bit on global weather. This is just an outlook for the next 10 days. Very wet in Australia, very wet in Southeast Asia. The Bermuda High is over the Azores, which means all the flow coming off of Africa is doing this, hitting parts of Western Europe, while Eastern Europe and Western Russia is dry. But a lot of us are focused on South America, which over the next couple of weeks, extremely wet in southern Brazil, no early signs of the monsoon in central and northern Brazil. And the concern here is that even though the ocean has moistened up the air here, we're not getting that full draw of the monsoonal moisture yet. It may not come until, the second or third week of October. And that's starting to do some stuff to the soybean market. Now, the soybean market on Monday was, I don't know if the right word is exuberant, but it moved a lot. And some of that story was compounded by weather. Not all of it, but some of it was. And the fact that it's so dry to start October here. Some of the new long-range models for the whole month of October were dry as well. Let me rephrase that, drier. Because I showed you this before, I'll show it to you again. Just go back 7 runs ago, back to the 16th, and I show you the forecast for October. Man, was it wet in there. That was going to be a very rapid plant. But now it seems as though it's going to be the second half of October that really gets things going because the new October forecast is not nearly as wet as it was. And they're waiting on the wet conditions to get the crop planted. It's a much different planting mentality there. Because of how quickly their soils drain, they have to wait on the rains to come in. They want 2 inches, 2 good inches of rain, get the seedbed right, and go aggressively after this. As it stands, let me see if I can pull this up real quick. IMEA, this is where I get this stuff. Is it this site here? Soybeans. Hang on a second. I should have this pulled up for you. IMEA. Oh, darn it. Well, anyways, I won't pull it up, but I'm just going to tell you. They are, in Mato Grosso, 0.2, I can't write either, 0.27% planted right now on soybeans. And they'd have to be, well over 2% if you want to call it a fast plant. The question is, are they going to continue to be slow in October? And right now, I think that's going to be the case. So I'll make sure and get that graphic up for you right when we do the October update. But for right now, this is what I got for your long range. You've now seen the main threats early in the forecast with Helene. Please stay safe. Please use the National Weather Service. They are the experts in this. They do not put in hype. They put in information. That's why I want you getting it. And again, your best source for that, let's go back to this site, nhc.noaa.gov, right here. They just named it. Can you believe that? When I started recording, we didn't have a name. Now it's called Helene. So there you go. They got a new forecast cone out. That's their newest major hurricane at landfall, 8 p.m. Thursday. So gosh, I just had to make the video long enough and we would get that information out. This is looking pretty nuts here. Let's see if the storm surge has been updated. That's still quite similar. Rainfall potential. Yeah, look at the Appalachian Mountains up here against the Blue Ridge. These are chances here of 4, 6, 8, 12 inches of rainfall. No change in what I told you, but we just finally got a new update from the National Hurricane Center. So let's watch this together. Be very weather aware going forward. I'll stop there. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you next month. Thanks.